The entire final portion of this maze would take place on the Nebuchadnezzar in the real world. Hello and welcome back to the Haunt Line, the show dedicated to SoCal haunts and events. Today's episode is going to be a little different, but I'm super excited. So I am currently competing in a maze pitch tournament hosted by the Knights of Horror. And actually the maze that I'm going to pitch to you on this episode is the maze that secured me a spot in the next round of the tournament. I actually went up against Mr. E from TLEV Horror. Mr. E, kudos, brother. Now, outside of the tournament, I've actually always loved coming up with ideas for mazes or for how to turn like a story or a show or a franchise into a maze, especially if the source material isn't inherently scary or something horror related. That's the big challenge there. That's what I love the most. So I figured, hey, why not start maze pitches on this channel too? So this is going to serve as the first of many maze pitches that I'm going to do on this channel. So without further ado, please enjoy my pitch for a maze based off of The Matrix. Now, I want to apologize ahead of time because I've got my cues on my iPad, so I'm going to be reading off of it a lot, so if we break contact, I'm sorry. Now, I know this is not a traditional horror maze, but it is pretty scary because if you think about it in the movie, right? If you're not being chased by one of those mechanical sentinels, those killing death machines, you're being chased by the stone cold agents like Agent Smith. So you either got an agent coming after you or you've got a sentinel coming after you. That's terrifying to me. And also thanks to John Cook, I'm a big fan of maze stunts now. If we can throw a stunt in a maze, let's do it. And a maze based off of The Matrix is definitely perfect for a whole slew of maze stunts. So here is my pitch for a maze based off of The Matrix. Now this, I think this maze would probably work best in a sound stage or in a warehouse, but I could totally see it happening in a tent too. And it starts with the facade. The facade is a giant LED wall that has the Matrix code sprinkling down on it. So it's just this giant, I want it to be huge too. I would want it to be you think about the height of the Ghostbusters Firehouse set from last year, about that tall and very wide, huge LED wall with the Matrix code raining down on it. And, you know, kind of setting the mood on the outside by playing bits of the score as guests wait in line. So then guests would enter the first room, which would be a giant square, easily at least 2 stories tall, a giant square of a room. All LED walls. I'm talking LED ceiling, LED wall, LED floor. The entire thing is LED walls, and this will enable the room to switch between settings constantly, between the white void known as the construct, the post-apocalyptic desert of the real, and the abandoned room where Morpheus offers Neo the pills. Now this room would be dressed just like it was in the construct, with 2 fancy armchairs and an old TV, and in the center of them all there would be a performer dressed as Morpheus, warning guests that no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. And he would offer guests the choice of the red pill or the blue pill. So after that, the guests would exit this room and they would enter the first transitional hallway of the maze. And this one would be a pretty long hallway, and it would also kind of go from a wider sized hallway to a more narrow / normal sized hallway. Essentially, it would funnel guests through this area, right? And this room would be also comprised entirely of LED walls, and it would propel guests into the Matrix using surround sound and a green spinning gobo light effect to really sell the point that they are going into the Matrix. So that would lead guests to the second room, which would replicate Trinity's famous slow-mo kick. This room would require 2 stunt performers on wires, one to perform the slow-mo kick itself, and another one who would fall victim to the kick, and they would perform a pull stunt into the wall. And upon impact, air cannons would activate, and that would simulate kind of like a shockwave of the police officer hitting the wall, and it would also scare guests as they walk by. Guests would then go from that room into another transitional hallway, and this one would be dressed to look like an abandoned building. Thankfully, a lot of the Matrix takes place in abandoned buildings, so there's a lot of like decrepit hallways to choose from. So this one would take place in one of those hallways, and at the end of the hallway, there would be a Pepper's Ghost effect that would use projection to have a black cat cross and then glitch, replicating the deja vu scene from the movie. At this time, intense music would start playing, and guests would hear Trinity warn them that deja vu is usually a glitch in the Matrix. It's what happens when they change something. And this transitional hallway would include 2 scares, one from an agent and another from a SWAT officer, both of which come through doors with air cannons going off. So from there, guests would exit the building via an emergency exit and then enter an area made to look like a train station's turnstiles, which would lead guests into the money shot room, which is a replica of the subway station fight between Neo and Agent Smith, with 2 performers rigged up to do the spinning slow-mo shootout. The slow-mo portion of the shootout would include wind, air cannons, strobe lights, and surround sound to really immerse the guest in the moment. So guests would actually walk around this stunt, and as they walk around it, they'd be getting scared by agents popping out from behind pillars and even transforming into pedestrians like it happens in the movie, except here it would be done with double-sided costumes. So an agent would spin around from being a pedestrian, he would spin around and reveal that he is in fact an agent. So guests would walk through this room, and then on the opposite side of the room, they would exit the train station by walking into and through a phone booth with a ringing telephone. So this would lead guests into another transitional hallway like the first one, made to look like the Matrix, and it transports guests from the Matrix into the final room, which the entire final portion of this maze would take place on the Nebuchadnezzar in the real world. Guests enter one of the ship's corridors. Suspenseful music plays, alarms ring, and sentinel claws come through the cracks in the pipes. The sentinels are starting to break into the ship. Guests then walk by the ship's bridge. Tank is at the controls. He's panicking a little bit. We hear Morpheus say over the radio, "Tank, arm the EMP." And suddenly, a sentinel comes crashing through a cutout portion of the ceiling, scaring guests from above right in front of the ship's bridge. And the final scares happen down a hallway. It's a barrage of 3 consecutive sentinel puppet scares, giant sentinel puppet scares. They come out from behind pipes, scaring guests on either side of the ship's corridor until they get to the end of the hallway. Right before they exit the maze, they hear Trinity scream, "No!" And it's followed by an explosive electrical sound of the EMP activating, and thus ends the Matrix. Well, there you have it, guys. The first official maze pitch on the Hotline. Now, I actually omitted 2 things from this tournament just to cut down on the actual time of the pitch. But the 2 things that I omitted are a bathroom scene, which is the bathroom fight between Morpheus and Agent Smith, that would also include some big stunts. And the other was a jump scare that would include Cypher and a blaster scaring guests from down a hallway on the ship. But that's my pitch for a Matrix maze. Let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. And actually, up next on the tournament, I am going against Losh from Losh TV, who pitched an awesome maze based on all 4 Scream movies in the last episode of the tournament. So I'll be sure and keep you guys posted on our match. Don't forget, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Hotline. Visit us on the web at www.thehotline.com. And you can download our podcast wherever you download podcasts, and we'll be having new episodes on that soon. And until the next time, thank you for calling The Hotline.